To transition from supporting player to central figure in a corporate drama? Yes, I said simply. I've been ready longer than I realized. Olivia smiled. Then let's go change the world, or at least a small corner of the tech industry. As we said our goodbyes to the Wilson family, Eleanor hugged me fiercely. Remember, you're always welcome here, she whispered. This will always be home if you need it. Robert's handshake was firm, his expression conveying respect without words. Margaret waved regally from her place of honor in the great room, her sharp eyes suggesting she'd be watching my progress with great interest. The drive back to Seattle gave me time to reflect on the extraordinary transformation of the past 48 hours. I had arrived at the family reunion as Daniel Wilson's wife, living in the shadow of his success. I was leaving as Rebecca Wilson, chairwoman of Horizon Technologies, architect of her own future. Daniel had planned to use our family reunion to end our story on his terms. Instead, it had become the first chapter of my new beginning. A beginning founded not on revenge, but on reclamation of my voice, my value, and my vision. As the Seattle skyline came into view, I felt a surge of determination. The challenges ahead were significant. Restructuring leadership, unwinding questionable financial arrangements, rebuilding corporate culture. But for the first time in years, I was facing the future on my own terms, not as an accessory to someone else's narrative. Daniel had taught me something after all, that true power doesn't come from controlling others, but from knowing your own worth and standing firmly in your truth. It wasn't the lesson he'd intended, but it was the one that would shape everything that came next. The woman who had arrived at the family reunion was Daniel Wilson's wife, living in his shadow. The woman driving into Seattle was Rebecca Wilson, chairwoman of Horizon Technologies, ready to write her own story. Daniel had tried to craft my ending. Instead, he'd only succeeded in helping me find my voice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. I own everything now, I whispered, watching my husband's face drain of color as I slid the acquisition papers across our family's antique oak table. Daniel had just announced to our entire family that our marriage was over, his calculated move to humiliate me at our annual Wilson family reunion. He didn't realize I'd spent 6 months secretly acquiring controlling interest in Horizon Technologies, the company he'd built while I supported him from the shadows. The company he was planning to keep entirely for himself while leaving me with nothing but memories and broken promises. Is this some kind of joke, Rebecca? Daniel hissed, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the documents. His perfect facade cracked for the first time in our 15 years of marriage, revealing the man I now knew him to be. Behind him, Jessica shifted uncomfortably, no longer looking triumphant in her designer dress that cost more than some people's monthly salary. Not a joke, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Just good business. You taught me that, remember? The stunned silence around our family cabin's massive dining room was worth every sleepless night, every clandestine meeting, every moment of pain I'd endured since finding Daniel and Jessica together in his office 6 months ago. I hadn't just been planning my survival, I'd been orchestrating my renaissance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Our story began like a Seattle fairy tale. College sweethearts who built a life together as Daniel's software startup grew from our garage into a tech empire. I had put my interior design career on hold, throwing myself into creating the perfect home, hosting the perfect parties, being the perfect wife to a rising tech star. For 15 years, I had been the woman behind the successful man, never realizing I was actually the woman beneath his shoe. The Wilson family cabin in the Cascade Mountains had always been our happy place. 3 generations of Wilsons gathered here every Memorial Day weekend, a tradition that predated even my relationship with Daniel. This year, I had almost begged off, inventing excuses to avoid the gathering. But Olivia, my best friend since college, had convinced me otherwise. "You have to go, Becky," she had insisted during one of our coffee meetings at her downtown gallery. "It's the perfect setting for what we've planned. Everyone who matters to Daniel will be there to witness it." The spring morning had started perfectly. Sunshine filtering through towering pines, the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls wafting from the kitchen where Daniel's mother supervised breakfast preparation. Family members lounged on the sprawling deck overlooking the lake, sharing stories and laughter. Daniel had been particularly attentive, refilling my coffee cup, his hand lingering on my shoulder in a display of affection that had become rare in recent months. "Have you seen Daniel?" I asked his cousin Amy, who was arranging wildflowers in a vase near the stone fireplace. "I think he went to the boathouse with Jessica to go over some presentation," she replied, her brow furrowing slightly. "Something about quarterly projections they need to finalize before Tuesday's investor meeting." Jessica Parker, his marketing director of just 7 months, young and ambitious with her MBA from Stanford, and her perfectly highlighted hair. I'd noticed the way she looked at Daniel during the company Christmas party, how she always seemed to need his input on projects that surely a marketing director could handle independently. I'd dismissed my concerns as insecurity. After all, Daniel was one of Seattle's most respected tech entrepreneurs. Everyone looked at him that way. Something in Amy's tone made my stomach clench. I'd been ignoring the signs for months. The late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the way he'd changed his phone password. But this weekend was supposed to be about family, about reconnecting. "I'll go find them," I said, forcing a smile. "Make sure they don't miss lunch." I walked through the cabin, my sandals nearly silent against the hardwood floors. The sound of laughter and conversation faded as I moved toward the back of the property, past the family photos that lined the hallway. Snapshots of ski trips, summer barbecues, anniversary celebrations, each step feeling heavier than the last as I approached the boathouse. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the wooden dock. I heard their voices before I saw them, hushed but clear in the quiet of the lakeside setting. "Everything's prepared," Jessica's voice, confident and smooth. "I've drafted the announcement. Once you tell everyone about the divorce today, we can move forward with the plan." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're sure about the timing?" Daniel's voice, the one he used when strategizing a product launch. "It's perfect," Jessica replied. "Everyone important will be here. Family, key investors, your entire support network. When you explain how you've grown apart, how you tried to make it work but Rebecca just wasn't supportive of your vision anymore, they'll understand. Then we can announce the company restructuring next week once the personal news has settled." I stood frozen, my hand pressed against the weathered wood of the boathouse, my world tilting on its axis. The gentle lapping of lake water against the dock seemed to fade to white noise as blood rushed in my ears. Through the gap in the door, I could see them clearly. Jessica perched on the edge of the antique desk we'd restored together, her skirt riding up her thighs while Daniel leaned against the window, divorce papers spread between them like battle plans. "And the prenup?" Jessica asked, her perfectly manicured fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. Daniel laughed, that rich, confident laugh I'd once loved. "Ironclad. She'll walk away with the house and a settlement that'll barely cover 5 years of expenses. Nothing that would affect the company. I drafted it myself back when we had nothing, and she never insisted on updating it when we had everything." "You're brilliant, you know that?" Jessica said, standing to move closer to him. "I couldn't have planned this without you. Once everything's settled, we can finally be together openly. Chief Executive Officer and Chief Marketing Officer, Seattle's new power couple." I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. 15. Years of marriage, of building a life together, and he'd planned to end it all during our family reunion, in front of everyone we knew. The humiliation would have been absolute, exactly as they'd planned. I made my way back to the main house in a daze, muscle memory guiding me through familiar paths. Olivia was waiting on the back porch, her dark eyes scanning my face as I approached. One look at me and she knew. "You heard them," she whispered, taking my arm and guiding me away from curious family members. "I need your help," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I need you to call Ryan." Olivia's brother Ryan was a financial analyst who'd helped uncover some of Seattle's biggest corporate schemes. If Daniel thought he could cut me out completely, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. "Whatever you need," Olivia said, already pulling out her phone. "But first, we need to get through this day without letting them know you've discovered their plan." I nodded, straightening my shoulders. Daniel had taught me something after all those years of watching him in boardrooms. Sometimes the best defense is making your opponent think they're winning. "Help me fix my makeup," I said to Olivia. "We have a family reunion to host." As I reapplied my lipstick in the upstairs bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, her eyes harder, her smile sharper. Daniel and Jessica thought they had orchestrated the perfect plan, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I returned to the gathering, accepting offers of lemonade with practiced grace. Daniel and Jessica had returned, standing slightly apart, playing their roles perfectly. I watched as he raised his glass in my direction, that familiar smile in place. "To my beautiful wife," he announced to our family. "Thanks for organizing another perfect reunion." I smiled back, raising my glass. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them believe their plan was flawless. Because while they were plotting my humiliation, they'd given me something invaluable, the element of surprise. The day continued around me, but everything had changed. Each laugh felt hollow, each conversation tainted. But beneath the pain and betrayal, something else was growing: determination. Daniel thought he'd written the perfect ending to our marriage. He was about to learn that this was just the beginning, and I would write the final chapter. That evening, as family members gathered for the traditional barbecue, I slipped away to make a call. Ryan answered on the first ring. "Olivia filled me in," he said without preamble. "I can be there tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I need you to find anything. You can. Financial statements, property records, anything that might show where Daniel's hiding assets." "His laptop is in our room," I replied. "He never goes anywhere without it, but he's busy playing host right now, if I can get into it." "Do it," Ryan said firmly. "And Becky? Don't let him see you coming. Men like Daniel, they always underestimate what their wives know." I ended the call and made my way upstairs, my heart pounding. The master bedroom was empty, Daniel's laptop sitting on the nightstand. For years, I'd respected his privacy, never questioning his need for passwords and security. Now I realized it wasn't privacy he'd been protecting. It was secrets. The password screen glowed in the dimly lit room. I tried the usual suspects: our anniversary, his birthday, the date Horizon Technologies went public. Nothing worked. Then I remembered something. The view from our first apartment, the one he always said inspired him to build something meaningful. The Seattle skyline at night, with its most distinctive feature. "Columbia One," I typed, referring to the Columbia Center that had dominated our apartment view. The screen unlocked, revealing dozens of folders with innocuous names, project code names I'd heard him mention in passing. Where to start? A soft knock at the door made me jump. "Becky?" Olivia's voice. "Daniel's looking for you. The toasts are about to start." "Coming," I called, quickly photographing the screen with my phone. No time to dig deeper now, but at least I had access. I locked the computer and returned it exactly as I'd found it. Downstairs, the family had gathered on the deck, champagne, glasses in hand. Daniel stood at the center, Jessica hovering near the edge of the group, trying to look uninvolved yet somehow essential. This was it, the moment they'd planned, the public execution of our marriage. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Daniel began, his voice carrying that practiced sincerity that had convinced countless investors to trust him with millions. "I have something important to share with you all." I felt Olivia's hand slip into mine, a silent show of support as Daniel continued. "Family means everything to me, which is why I wanted you all here for this announcement." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, briefly meeting mine with what looked almost like regret. Was that part of the act too? As you know, Horizon Technologies has been growing exponentially. We're on the verge of our biggest expansion yet, a new artificial intelligence division that will revolutionize how businesses operate. This wasn't the script I'd overheard. I tensed, waiting for the pivot to our marriage. "And as we grow, changes are inevitable," he continued. "Which is why today, I'm announcing a major restructuring of our executive team." Jessica straightened, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. She thought this was leading to her promotion. The first step in their plan: establish her credentials before revealing our personal situation. "Rebecca has been by my side since before Horizon was even an idea," Daniel said, turning to me with that television-ready smile. "She supported me through every challenge, every late night, every risk. Many of you don't know this, but she actually came up with the name Horizon because she said we were always looking toward the future, never content with where we were." Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the group. Daniel's mother beamed at me proudly, completely unaware of what was coming. "Which is why," Daniel continued, "today is particularly difficult." Here it was. I braced myself, squeezing Olivia's hand so hard I must have hurt her, though she didn't flinch. "Rebecca and I have been discussing our future for some time now," he said, his voice softening in a way that would read as emotional to everyone who didn't know better. "And we've come to the conclusion that it's time for a change." A hush fell over the gathering. Daniel's father frowned, sensing something significant was coming. Jessica took a small step forward, ready for her moment. "After 15 years of marriage," Daniel said, "Rebecca and I will be going our separate ways." The collective gasp was audible. Daniel's mother put her hand to her mouth. His father's frown deepened into something like anger. Cousins exchanged shocked glances while Daniel's sister immediately looked to me, her eyes full of questions and concern. "It's not a decision we've come to lightly," Daniel continued smoothly. "But people grow apart. Their visions change. And while Rebecca will always be family to all of you, our paths are diverging. She'll be keeping our home, of course, and I'll be focusing on the next chapter of Horizon Technologies with our expanded leadership team." On cue, he gestured to Jessica, who stepped forward with perfectly practiced reluctance, as if she hated being part of this moment but was professionally obligated to stand by her CEO. Jessica Parker will be stepping up as our new Chief Operating Officer, taking over day-to-day operations while I focus on strategic vision and our AI initiatives. The pieces fell into place for anyone paying attention. The divorce, Jessica's promotion, the neat packaging of personal and professional changes in one devastating announcement. Daniel had orchestrated it perfectly, positioning himself as the visionary moving forward while casting me as the anchor holding him back. But he hadn't counted on what happened next. "Well," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent deck, "this is certainly a surprise." All eyes turned to me. Daniel's expression flickered, concern that I might cause a scene, embarrass myself in front of everyone with emotional outbursts or accusations. Jessica looked tense, ready for any contingency. Since we're making announcements, I continued, reaching into my tote bag for the folder I'd been carrying all day, I actually have one of my own. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't in his script. Becky, maybe we should discuss personal matters privately. Oh, but this isn't just personal, I interrupted, opening the folder. It's business, and as you've always said, family should be the first to know about important business developments. Confusion rippled through the gathering. Daniel's father leaned forward, his business instincts triggered by my tone. For the past 6 months, I've been working on a project of my own, I explained, removing a document from the folder. An investment opportunity that I thought had tremendous potential. Daniel's confusion was shifting to alarm. He knew I had my own money, the inheritance from my grandmother that I'd never touched, the success of my interior design consulting that I'd maintained even while supporting his career. But I'd never shown interest in his business world beyond being the supportive wife at investor dinners. With the help of some very talented financial advisors, I continued, nodding toward Olivia, who stood tall beside me, I've been quietly acquiring stock in a promising technology company. Through private sales, minor shareholders, and some particularly interesting convertible notes that were coming due. Daniel's face had gone pale. He knew exactly what I was saying, but couldn't seem to process it. As of this morning, I said, walking forward to hand him the document, I own 26% of Horizon Technologies, which, combined with the 5% you transferred to me on our 10th anniversary as a symbolic gesture, gives me controlling interest in the company you just announced is restructuring. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the calculations happening behind Daniel's eyes, checking my math, searching for the flaw in my statement, the loophole he could exploit. That's not possible, he finally managed. Those shares weren't for sale. Everyone has a price, I replied, using one of his favorite phrases. Some of your early investors were quite happy to cash out at a premium, especially when they heard rumors about management issues. Daniel's eyes darted to Jessica, who looked equally stunned. Had one of them leaked something? Had word gotten out about their affair, their plans? And the Baldwin Group's convertible notes? I added, referencing his first major investors. They were quite surprised you hadn't arranged refinancing. Almost as if you'd forgotten they could convert to equity if not paid off on schedule. He hadn't forgotten. He'd been counting on using company cash reserves to pay those notes off next quarter, after announcing the divorce, after securing his position as the unquestioned leader of Horizon, after making sure I couldn't touch the company's future. I own everything now, I whispered, watching my husband's face drain of color as I slid the acquisition papers across our family's antique oak table that had been moved outside for the occasion. Daniel had just announced to our entire family that our marriage was over, his calculated move to humiliate me at our annual Wilson family reunion. He didn't realize I'd spent 6 months secretly acquiring controlling interest in Horizon Technologies, the company he'd built while I supported him from the shadows, the company he was planning to keep entirely for himself, while leaving me with nothing but memories and broken promises. Is this some kind of joke, Rebecca? Daniel hissed, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the documents. His perfect facade cracked for the first time in our 15 years of marriage, revealing the man I now knew him to be. Behind him, Jessica shifted uncomfortably, no longer looking triumphant in her designer dress that cost more than some people's monthly salary. Not a joke, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Just good business. You taught me that, remember? The stunned silence around our family cabin's massive dining room was worth every sleepless night, every clandestine meeting, every moment of pain I'd endured since finding Daniel and Jessica together in his office 6 months ago. I hadn't just been planning my survival. I'd been orchestrating my renaissance. You can't do this, Daniel said, his voice losing its practiced smoothness. The board won't. The board has already been notified, I cut in. In fact, there will be an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the company's new direction. I've taken the liberty of preparing a press release about our exciting new leadership structure. I pulled another document from my folder and began to read. Horizon Technologies announces the appointment of Rebecca Wilson as chairwoman of the board, effective immediately. Ms. Wilson, a founding investor in Horizon, will oversee strategic vision while a new executive team is selected. The company thanks Daniel Wilson for his service as CEO and wishes him well in his future endeavors. Daniel's sister let out what might have been a laugh before quickly disguising it as a cough. His father was watching me with what appeared to be newfound respect. Additionally, I continued, Horizon will be implementing a new ethics policy regarding workplace relationships, effective immediately. Jessica took an involuntary step back, suddenly aware that everyone was looking at her with new understanding. Rebecca, Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous as he stepped toward me. We need to discuss this privately. We're well beyond privacy, Daniel, I replied. You were happy to announce our divorce in front of everyone we love. I'm simply following your lead with my business announcement. His mother had tears streaming down her face, though I couldn't tell if they were from the divorce announcement or the corporate takeover that followed. His father had moved to stand beside her, his arm around her shoulders in silent support. Now, I said, addressing the entire gathering, I believe we were about to have dessert. I made Grandma Wilson's blackberry cobbler, her recipe, as always. The absurd normalcy of the statement broke the tension. Daniel's cousin Amy let out a nervous laugh, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Confused questions, shocked exclamations, and through it all, Daniel stood frozen, the acquisition, papers still in his hand. As family members moved toward the kitchen in a daze, seeking comfort in routine and sugar, Olivia squeezed my hand. You did it, she whispered. I nodded, watching as Jessica slipped away from the group, phone already in hand. No doubt calling their lawyer, searching for a way to undo what I'd done. But there wasn't one. I'd been meticulous, working with Ryan and a team of attorneys to ensure every purchase was legitimate, every document ironclad. Daniel finally moved, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the others. How? He demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. How did you know? I looked into the eyes of the man I'd loved for 15 years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. I didn't, at first, I admitted. But 6 months ago, when I came to surprise you at the office for your birthday, I overheard you and Jessica discussing your future and how I wasn't part of it. His grip on my arm loosened slightly as realization dawned. That day, you brought cupcakes. The admin said you'd stopped by but didn't wait. I heard enough, I said simply, about how you were planning to wait until after the Stevens acquisition to file for divorce, how you'd been moving assets into shell companies, how Jessica wasn't just warming your bed, she was helping you plan my financial destruction. Daniel ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a nervous gesture I'd rarely seen from him. It wasn't like that, he tried, falling back on his considerable charm. Things between us hadn't been right for a long time, Becky. You know that. We were growing apart. Save it for your press statement, I interrupted. The one explaining why you're no longer CEO of Horizon Technologies. You can't run Horizon, he said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. You don't know the first thing about the technology sector. I smiled, remembering all the nights I'd listened to him talk about work, all the investor dinners, where I'd engaged with board members, all the product launches I'd attended. I know enough to hire the right people, people who value integrity as much as innovation. The prenup, he started. The prenup protects your personal assets from me in a divorce, I agreed. But it says nothing about my right to purchase stock in a publicly traded company. I didn't violate our agreement, Daniel. I just beat you at your own game." Over his shoulder, I could see Jessica returning, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. Whatever calls she'd made hadn't provided the solution they were hoping for. "The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow morning," I said, stepping back from Daniel. "I expect your resignation letter before then. You can keep the Seattle penthouse. I never liked it anyway. Jessica's promotion, however, will not be moving forward." I turned to walk away, then paused, looking back at the man who had been the center of my world for so long. "Oh, and Daniel? I've taken the liberty of forwarding all emails between you and Jessica from the company server to our family attorney, in case you were thinking of contesting the divorce settlement." His face went from pale to ashen. Those emails wouldn't just reveal their affair. They would expose conversations about hiding assets, about using company resources for personal gain, about their plans to diminish my role in Horizon's founding and success. "You wouldn't," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. He didn't know me anymore, or perhaps he never really had. "I already did," I replied. "Check your phone." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced down at it, then back at me with new understanding. This wasn't just revenge. It was a complete reversal of power. I walked back to the main gathering, where Daniel's mother was serving cobbler with shaking hands while family members tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of 20 minutes, their understanding of our marriage, Daniel's character, and Horizon's future had been completely upended. Daniel's father approached me, his expression unreadable. Robert Wilson had built a successful construction company from nothing, instilling in his son the drive that had propelled Horizon's early success. I'd always respected him, even when his hard-charging business philosophy had seemed at odds with my more balanced approach to life. "That was quite a counter-move," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "I learned from watching you and Daniel," I replied honestly. "Never show your hand until you're ready to play it." The older man nodded slowly. "He underestimated you. We all did." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Robert Wilson, it was as close as anyone ever got. I accepted it with a small nod. "What will you do with Horizon?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Build it into what it always should have been," I said. "A company that values innovation and integrity equally. We have brilliant engineers, dedicated staff. They deserve leadership that respects what they've built." Robert studied me for a long moment, then extended his hand. The Wilson family reunions just got a lot more interesting. I laughed, despite everything, shaking his hand firmly. "I considered skipping this year," I admitted. "I'm glad I didn't." As the evening progressed, I watched Daniel and Jessica huddled in urgent conversation on the dock, their dream of becoming Seattle's power couple evaporating with each passing minute. Family members drifted between shock, confusion, and morbid curiosity, torn between loyalty to Daniel and growing respect for what I'd done. Olivia stayed by my side, fielding questions I wasn't ready to answer, running interference when needed. "Ryan's on his way," she murmured as we cleared dessert plates. "He'll be here first thing tomorrow to go with you to the board meeting." I nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline began to fade. "I can't believe it worked," I whispered. 6 months of planning, of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I was crazy to even try. "Not crazy," Olivia corrected. "Strategic. Daniel always said you had an eye for potential. He just never thought you'd turn that eye on his company." Later that night, as family members retreated to their rooms in awkward silence, I stood on the deck overlooking the moonlit lake. The same view I'd admired for 15 Memorial Day weekends, now forever changed by what had transpired today. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Linda, Daniel's executive assistant, approaching cautiously. I'd always liked Linda. She'd been with Horizon since the early days, her efficiency and discretion instrumental to the company's smooth operation. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, her usual formality intact despite the circumstances. "I wanted you to know that I've secured the company servers and implemented the access changes you requested." I blinked in surprise. That was fast. Linda permitted herself a small smile. "I received your email with the authentication codes. Once you had..." Controlling interest. It was a simple matter of following protocols for leadership changes. I studied her carefully. Linda had been Daniel's right hand for over a decade. Her loyalty had never been in question. "Why are you helping me?" I asked directly. Linda's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing a flash of something harder underneath. "I've worked for Mr. Wilson for 12 years. In that time, I've seen him make brilliant decisions and terrible ones. What he and Ms. Parker were planning to do to you and to the company..." She straightened her shoulders. "Let's just say I believe in Horizon's potential, and I believe you're now best positioned to protect it." I nodded slowly, understanding the layers beneath her statement. Linda wasn't just Daniel's assistant. She was Horizon's institutional memory, its operational backbone, and she had just declared her allegiance. "Thank you, Linda," I said simply. "I'll need your expertise in the days ahead." "You'll have it," she replied with a crisp nod. "The board members have all confirmed for tomorrow's meeting. I've prepared briefing documents highlighting the company's current challenges and opportunities, matters Mr. Wilson may have been selectively transparent about." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Linda hadn't just switched allegiance tonight. She'd been hedging her bets for some time, perhaps seeing warning signs in Daniel's leadership that others had missed. "Get some rest," Linda advised, her professional mask back in place. "Tomorrow will be demanding." As she turned to go, I called after her softly. "Linda, how long have you known? About Daniel and Jessica?" She paused without turning back. "Mrs. Wilson, it's my job to know everything that affects Horizon's operations. Personal relationships that compromise leadership decision-making fall within that purview." With that, she disappeared into the cabin, leaving me alone with the moonlight and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. I took a deep breath of pine-scented air, feeling truly at peace for the first time in months. Daniel had planned to use our family reunion to end our story on his terms. Instead, it had become the first chapter of my new beginning. Tomorrow would bring challenges: a board to convince, a company to stabilize, a divorce to finalize. But tonight, standing on the deck of the cabin that had witnessed so many Wilson family milestones, I allowed myself to feel something I'd thought Daniel had stolen from me forever: hope. The woman who had arrived at this reunion was Daniel Wilson's wife, living in the shadow of his success. The woman who would leave it was Rebecca Wilson, majority shareholder of Horizon Technologies, architect of her own future. Daniel had tried to write my ending. Instead, he'd only succeeded in helping me find my voice. I retreated from the boathouse in a daze, my mind racing faster than my feet could carry me. The lakeside path I'd walked hundreds of times now felt foreign, as if the earth itself had shifted beneath me. Daniel's words echoed in my head: ironclad prenup. Barely enough to cover 5 years. Seattle's new power couple. Each phrase, a dagger, each realization a deeper wound. Olivia spotted me immediately as I emerged from the tree line. She stood on the cabin's lower deck, scanning the property with worried eyes until she caught sight of me. 15 years of friendship had forged a connection between us that didn't require words. One look at my face told her everything. "Becky," she murmured, hurrying down the steps to meet me. She guided me away from the main gathering, toward a secluded garden bench partly hidden by towering rhododendrons in full bloom. "What happened?" "It's worse than we thought," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "They're planning to announce the divorce today at lunch, in front of everyone." Olivia's eyes widened. "Today? We weren't expecting..." "They want to humiliate me," I continued, the pieces falling into place as I spoke. Make it seem like I've been holding Daniel back. Jessica's already drafted their press release about the company restructuring that will follow next week. Those bastards, Olivia hissed, squeezing my hand. We need to call Ryan right now. I shook my head. Not here. Daniel might see. I need to get back inside, act normal. We can't let them know I overheard. Olivia studied me carefully. Are you sure you can do this? Face them? For a moment, I wasn't. The thought of sitting across from Daniel, pretending I didn't know he was about to destroy me publicly, seemed impossible. Then something hardened inside me. A core of steel I hadn't known existed until that moment. I've been playing the supportive wife for 15 years, I said, straightening my shoulders. I can manage a few more hours. Olivia nodded, her expression shifting from concern to determination. I'll make the calls, you keep them distracted. As we walked back toward the cabin, I caught a glimpse of Daniel and Jessica emerging from the boathouse, carefully maintaining professional distance, their secrets safely hidden, or so they thought. Daniel's perfectly tailored casual wear, Jessica's calculated weekend chic outfit, everything about them suddenly seemed performative, a show I'd been too trusting to recognize. Inside, preparations for lunch were underway. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, directed family members with the precision of a symphony conductor, assigning tasks with the same efficiency that had characterized her 40-year career as a hospital administrator before retirement. Rebecca, dear, she called when she spotted me. Would you check if the table on the upper deck is set properly? Daniel wanted lunch served outside to enjoy the view. Of course he did. The upper deck offered panoramic views of the lake and mountains, a picture-perfect backdrop for shattering my world. I forced a smile. Happy to help, Eleanor. As I arranged place settings on the massive redwood table, I studied the family photos displayed along the deck's edge. Wilson family reunions meticulously documented through the years. Daniel as a gangly teenager, his sister Megan's graduation, the first reunion after Daniel and I were married. I'd always felt welcomed into this family, if slightly peripheral to its tight-knit core. Now, I wondered how many of them would stay connected to me after today. Need a hand? I turned to find Robert Wilson, Daniel's father, standing in the doorway. At 72, he maintained the commanding presence that had made him successful in Seattle's competitive construction industry. His expression was unreadable as always, but something in his eyes seemed different, assessing. I think I've got it, I replied, adjusting a wayward water glass. Eleanor wants everything perfect. Robert nodded, stepping onto the deck and surveying the view. She always does. He paused, hands clasped behind his back. Daniel's been preoccupied this weekend. It wasn't a question, but the implication was clear. Robert Wilson hadn't built Wilson Construction from nothing, without developing a keen sense for when something was amiss. Work is always busy, I offered, the practiced response of countless corporate wives. Robert made a non-committal sound, still facing the lake. You know, Rebecca, I've always appreciated your steadiness. When Daniel gets caught up in his grand visions, you've been the one to keep things grounded. I froze, uncertain how to respond. In 15 years, this might have been the most personal conversation Robert had initiated with me. Thank you, I said finally. That means a lot. He turned then, his weathered face solemn. Whatever happens, remember you've earned your place. Not just as Daniel's wife, but as a Wilson. Before I could process his words, he was gone, leaving me to wonder if he somehow knew what Daniel was planning. Had he noticed the signs I'd missed, or was Robert Wilson simply better at reading people than I'd given him credit for? No time to dwell on it. Olivia appeared at my side, her face composed but her eyes conveying urgency. Ryan's on his way, she whispered, pretending to help me with the place settings. He's bringing Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson, one of Seattle's most ruthless corporate attorneys. If Olivia had called him on a holiday weekend, the situation was even more serious than I'd thought. "Already?" I whispered back. "How?" We're both at Ryan's lake house in Chelan. They can be here in 3 hours." She squeezed my arm. "We need to delay Daniel's announcement. Can you think of anything?" "Lunch is served," Eleanor's voice rang out, cutting off our conversation. Family members began drifting toward the deck, carrying platters of food and pitchers of lemonade. Daniel appeared, guiding his grandmother's wheelchair with practiced care, always the devoted grandson when others were watching. I took my seat at the opposite end of the table from Daniel, as tradition dictated. From this position, I could see the entire Wilson clan, Daniel's sister Megan with her husband and twins, cousins from both sides, Eleanor and Robert presiding over their family domain. Jessica had been seated midway down the table, the placement, suggesting professional importance without revealing personal intimacy. I wondered who had decided on the seating arrangement and whether they had known they were setting the stage for my public execution. The meal began with Robert's traditional blessing, followed by the controlled chaos of past dishes and multiple conversations. I went through the motions automatically: smile, pass the salad, comment on the weather, ask about Megan's children's school achievements. My mind was elsewhere, calculating options, evaluating scenarios, searching for a way to delay what was coming. Halfway through the meal, Daniel stood, tapping his water glass with a spoon. The conversations quieted as family members turned expectantly toward him. This was it. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began, raising his glass. The practiced charm was in full effect. Perfect smile, confident posture, the charisma that had convinced investors to entrust millions to his vision. To family, and to my beautiful wife, Rebecca. Eyes turned to me, many with genuine affection. I raised my glass mechanically, meeting Daniel's gaze across the length of the table. Did I imagine the flicker of guilt behind his practiced smile? 15 years ago, Daniel continued, Rebecca took a chance on a guy with big dreams and empty pockets. She believed in me when Horizon was just an idea sketched on napkins in our apartment. The muscles in my jaw tightened. He was building a narrative, the supportive wife who had served her purpose in the origin story, but was no longer needed for the next chapter. Without her, Daniel began, but was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of his grandmother choking. Margaret Wilson, family matriarch at 92, was coughing violently, her face alarming red. In an instant, the focus shifted from Daniel's speech to his grandmother's distress. Megan, a nurse practitioner, was at Margaret's side immediately, while Daniel abandoned his toast to hover anxiously. "She's all right," Megan announced after a tense moment. "Just went down the wrong pipe. Let's get her inside to rest." As Daniel helped wheel his grandmother inside, the moment for his announcement had passed. Lunch resumed with subdued conversation, the rhythm of the gathering disrupted. Jessica caught my eye briefly from across the table, her frustration poorly concealed. Their perfect plan had hit an unexpected delay. I excused myself to help in the kitchen, finding Eleanor loading the dishwasher with methodical precision. "Is Margaret okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned despite my relief at the interruption. "She'll be fine," Eleanor replied, rinsing a serving. Platter. Though I'm sure she did it on purpose. I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. "What?" Eleanor gave me a sideways glance. "Margaret doesn't miss much. If she didn't want Daniel to finish whatever he was saying, she'd find a way to stop him." She closed the dishwasher with a decisive click. My mother-in-law has always had impeccable timing. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated with a text from Olivia. "Back garden, now." I slipped outside, finding Olivia pacing near the rose trellis, phone in hand. "Ryan's having trouble accessing some financial records remotely," she said, without preamble. "He needs your login information for the joint accounts." I hesitated. Despite everything, using our shared accounts felt like crossing a line. "Becky," Olivia said gently, "Daniel crossed the line months ago. Ryan needs to know what we're dealing with." She was right. I provided the information, watching as she relayed it to her brother. The sun filtered through the cedar branches above us, creating dappled patterns that seemed at odds with the darkness of the conversation. "What did Mark Thompson say?" I asked. Olivia looked up from her phone. "That time is critical. The fact that Daniel was planning to announce today shifts our timeline. Mark says if Daniel has been hiding assets, there will be a paper trail. The sooner we find it, the better our position." "I need to access Daniel's laptop," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "There must be documents, emails, something that shows what they're planning." "Too risky," Olivia countered. "If he catches you." "He won't," I insisted. Daniel always takes a swim after lunch at these reunions. 20 minutes in the lake, like clockwork. The laptop will be in our room. Olivia didn't look convinced, but nodded. "Be careful, and quick." Back inside, the family had dispersed to various activities. Some were playing cards in the great room, others had gone down to the dock. Daniel was nowhere in sight, but Jessica was engaged in conversation with his cousin Amy, no doubt trying to ingratiate herself with the family she hoped to join officially once I was out of the picture. I found Linda Martinez, Daniel's longtime executive assistant, sitting alone on the side porch with a book. Linda had been with Horizon since the early days, her efficiency and discretion instrumental to the company's success. She'd always been professionally cordial to me, though firmly in Daniel's camp. "Linda," I said, taking the chair beside her, "I'm surprised Daniel dragged you to a family weekend." She marked her place in her book. "The Stevens acquisition is in a critical phase. Mr. Wilson wanted me available for any urgent matters." The Stevens acquisition, the major deal Daniel and Jessica had mentioned in the boathouse. The one they planned to complete before serving me divorce papers. "Of course," I nodded. "It's a game changer for Horizon, isn't it?" Linda's expression remained neutral. "It represents significant expansion opportunity, yes." I took a chance. "Strange that Jessica's here too. Seems like overkill to have both marketing and executive staff on a family weekend." Something flickered in Linda's eyes, so brief I might have imagined it. "Ms. Parker has been heavily involved in the acquisition strategy." "I'll bet she has," I thought bitterly. Aloud, I said, "Well, I'm glad Daniel has such dedicated staff. If you'll excuse me, I think I'll change for a swim." As I walked away, I felt Linda's eyes on my back, assessing. Had I imagined the momentary crack in her professional veneer? Or was Daniel's loyal assistant perhaps not as oblivious to the real situation as I'd assumed? In our bedroom, I changed quickly into a swimsuit, then made a show of walking down to the lake with a towel, making sure I was seen by family members along the way. I spotted Daniel already in the water, his powerful crawl stroke carrying him parallel to the shore. Jessica was nowhere to be seen, probably using the private time to coordinate next steps after their lunch plan had been derailed. Instead of entering the water, I circled back to the cabin through a less-used path, slipping inside through the mudroom entrance. The hallways were quiet, most guests outside enjoying the perfect spring weather. I reached our bedroom without encountering anyone, locking the door behind me. Daniel's laptop sat on the desk by the window, closed but not powered down. He never fully shut it off, too impatient to wait for startup. I opened it, facing the login screen I'd seen thousands of times before but had never attempted to breach. Daniel was protective of his workspace, a boundary I'd always respected out of trust, and, I now realized, naivete. I tried the obvious. Passwords first. His birth date, our anniversary, combinations of family names. Nothing worked. Then I remembered a conversation from our early days, when Horizon was still being built in our garage. Everything I create is rooted in that moment, he'd told me late one night, both of us exhausted but exhilarated by the possibilities ahead. Standing on that ridge in Olympic National Park, seeing the horizons stretch out endlessly. That's what I want to build, something with infinite potential. I typed Olympic 2008, the location and year of that formative hike. The screen unlocked, revealing Daniel's desktop. My hands shook slightly as I navigated through his files. There were hundreds of documents, organized with the meticulous precision that characterized everything Daniel did. I started with emails, searching for Jessica's name. The results were overwhelming. Thousands of exchanges over the past months, many outside business hours. I opened one from 3 weeks ago. D. The offshore transfer is complete. Baldwin Group remains oblivious to the restructuring. Once the divorce is final, we can move the Horizon East assets under the new entity with minimal scrutiny. J. My stomach clenched. Horizon East was the company's expanding Asian division, representing nearly a third of its current valuation. They were planning to hide it from the divorce proceedings. I searched further, finding a folder labeled Stevens Integration. Inside was a document titled Timeline Personal Professional Integration. I opened it to find a meticulously organized chart detailing the next 6 months, divorce filing date, public statement strategy, corporate restructuring, and leadership transition planning. Jessica Parker was listed as incoming COO, with a note about relationship disclosure post-divorce finalization. They had planned everything, down to the day I would be erased from both Daniel's life and Horizon's history. The document even included talking points for investors, emphasizing how the company was evolving beyond its origins toward a more sophisticated global presence. My phone vibrated with a text from Olivia. Daniel out of water. Heading back. Hurry. I quickly photographed key documents with my phone, not having time to read them all thoroughly. I forwarded the images to Ryan with a brief message about what I'd found. Then I stumbled across a folder simply labeled RW. My initials. Inside was a single document, a draft of the divorce filing. I scanned it quickly, my breath catching at the allegations. Financial irresponsibility, lack of support for company growth, irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. It painted me as a decorative accessory who had fulfilled my purpose and was now hindering Daniel's vision. The document requested that the prenuptial agreement be enforced in full, limiting my settlement to essentially the house and a modest stipend. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about Daniel wanting out of our marriage. This was a coordinated campaign to diminish my role in everything we'd built together, to position me as an obstacle to be removed. And it had been in the works for months, possibly longer. Another text alert. He's inside, coming upstairs. I quickly closed the files, returning the laptop to its original position. As I moved toward the door, a final folder caught my eye. Baldwin. Conversion. The name resonated from the email I'd read. Without time to explore it, I snapped a quick photo of the folder contents list and closed the laptop. I slipped into the adjoining bathroom just as I heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway. Turning on the shower, I stepped inside, fully clothed, letting the water soak my swimsuit to create the illusion I'd been swimming. When Daniel entered the bedroom, I was wrapping my hair in a towel, the shower steam providing perfect cover for my flushed face and rapid breathing. "Oh," he said, seeming startled to find me there. "I thought you were down at the lake." "Too crowded," I lied smoothly. "Decided on a shower instead. How was your swim?" "Good," he replied, reaching for his phone. "Needed to clear my head before this afternoon." This afternoon, when he planned to try again with his announcement. "Any word on your grandmother?" I asked, deliberately changing the subject. "Is she feeling better?" Daniel's expression softened with genuine concern. "Mom's keeping her in her room to rest, but she seems fine. Probably just a scare." or a very perceptive old woman creating a diversion, if Eleanor's assessment was correct. I made a mental note to thank Margaret Wilson if I got the chance. I need to make some calls, Daniel said, gesturing to his laptop. Stephen's situation needs attention before markets open Monday. Of course, I replied, gathering my things. I'll get out of your way. As I left the room, I texted Olivia. Got it. Meeting spot? She replied immediately. Boathouse. Ryan's contact just arrived. I made my way down to the boathouse, careful to avoid being seen by family members. Inside, Olivia was waiting with a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, sharply dressed despite the casual setting, with an air of competent authority. Becky, this is Diane Lawson, Olivia introduced us. She works with Ryan on his more complicated financial investigations. Forensic accounting, Diane clarified, extending her hand. Specializing in hidden asset recovery. Ryan sent me the files you just forwarded. You've given us an excellent starting point. There's more, I said, pulling out my phone to show them the additional photos. Something about Baldwin Conversion and Horizon East being moved offshore. Diane's expression sharpened as she examined the images. The Baldwin Group holds convertible notes in Horizon, correct? Notes that are coming due soon? I nodded. They were early investors. The notes convert to equity if not paid by the end of the quarter. Which is exactly what Daniel is trying to prevent, Diane said, enlarging one of the images. These transactions suggest he's moving money through shell companies to pay off the Baldwin notes privately, keeping their potential equity out of the company's public valuation. Why would he do that? I asked. Because in a divorce, Diane explained, the company valuation directly impacts your settlement, prenup or not. If significant portions of Horizon's value are hidden or artificially deflated, I get even. Less, I finished for her. Olivia's phone buzzed. Ryan and Mark just arrived. They're meeting us at the lake house on the other side of the property. The Wilson family's secondary cabin, known as the lake house, was a smaller structure used primarily for overflow guests during reunions. This weekend it sat empty, the perfect place for a clandestine meeting. As we walked the perimeter trail to avoid being seen from the main cabin, I tried to process everything I'd learned. The man I'd built a life with, whose dreams I'd supported, whose company I'd helped shape from its earliest days, had been systematically planning to erase me. From his life, from Horizon's story, from my own financial security. What can we do? I asked Diane as we walked. If Daniel's already hidden assets offshore. Hidden doesn't mean gone, she replied confidently. Every transaction leaves traces. The more complex the scheme, the more vulnerabilities it contains. Ryan's already identified several suspicious transfers. At the lake house, Ryan Chen was setting up laptops on the dining table while Mark Thompson paced by the window, phone to his ear. Where Olivia was artistic and intuitive, her brother was analytical and precise, qualities that had made him highly sought after in Seattle's financial community. Rebecca, he greeted me with a quick hug. I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances. Me too, I replied, grateful for his presence nonetheless. Ryan had helped me set up my independent finances years ago, gently insisting I maintain my own accounts and investments separate from Daniel's. What have you found? Diane asked, joining Ryan at the table. The Baldwin Group situation is just the beginning, Ryan said, turning his laptop screen toward us. There's a pattern of systematic value extraction using subsidiary entities. Horizon East, as you discovered, but also several smaller acquisitions that have been restructured under offshore holdings. Mark Thompson ended his call and joined us. In his early 50s, with the precision of someone who billed by the minute, he wasted no time on pleasantries. We need to move quickly, he announced. I've just spoken with a colleague at the SEC. There are already questions about some of Horizon's recent filings. If Daniel is manipulating company assets ahead of a divorce, we're looking at potential Securities violations on top of matrimonial fraud. What does that mean for Rebecca? Olivia asked. Mark turned to me. It means we have leverage. Corporate fraud has consequences far beyond a divorce settlement. If Daniel has been hiding company assets to cheat you, he's also likely misrepresenting Horizon's position to shareholders and regulators. The implications were staggering. Daniel wasn't just planning to divorce me. He was potentially putting his entire company at risk to do so. What's our next step? I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of decisions that would reshape multiple lives, not just my own. Ryan and Mark exchanged glances. Based on what we've found, Ryan began, there's an opportunity here that goes beyond just protecting your interests in the divorce. Mark nodded. The Baldwin Group's convertible notes, if they're not paid by end of quarter and convert to equity instead, the ownership structure of Horizon changes significantly, Ryan finished. I leaned forward, beginning to understand. And if someone were to acquire those notes before they convert? They could potentially gain a controlling interest in Horizon, Mark confirmed, especially when combined with the 5% Daniel transferred to you on your 10th anniversary. I remembered that gesture, how touched I'd been by Daniel's insistence that I own a piece of our company. It had seemed so meaningful at the time. Now I wondered if it had simply been cheaper than renegotiating our prenup as Horizon's value soared. How would that even be possible? I asked. I don't have that kind of money. No, Ryan acknowledged. But you have your grandmother's trust fund, the one Daniel doesn't know about because your parents set it up before you were married. And you have your design business profits that you've kept separate. It's not enough to buy Baldwin's position outright, but it's enough to leverage with the right backing. Diane pulled up another screen. Baldwin's chairman has been wanting out for months. Ryan's already made preliminary inquiries through back channels. They might be amenable to a structured buyout if the terms are right. My mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about taking control of a narrative that Daniel had been writing without my consent for too long. Can we really do this? I asked, looking around at the impromptu war council that had assembled on my behalf. Mark Thompson's smile held no warmth, only professional appreciation for a well-executed strategy. With the evidence of financial manipulation you've uncovered, combined with the right pressure on Baldwin? Yes, Mrs. Wilson, I believe we can. For the next 2 hours, we developed a plan so audacious it would have seemed absurd that morning. Ryan worked financial models while Diane identified vulnerability points in Daniel's schemes. Mark drafted legal frameworks that would turn Daniel's own manipulations against him. Olivia kept watch, ensuring we weren't interrupted by curious family members. By late afternoon, we had the outlines of a counter-strategy that might just work, if we could execute it before Daniel realized what was happening. The key elements depended on timing, secrecy, and the proper understanding of how Daniel would react when cornered. We should head back, Olivia finally said, checking her watch. People will wonder where you've been, and Daniel's probably planning to make his announcement before dinner. I nodded, gathering my courage for the performance ahead. What about the Baldwin Group contact? I've arranged a video call for tonight, 9 p.m., Ryan said. After everyone's settled in for the evening, their Asia team is working on it now. As we walked back toward the main cabin, Olivia squeezed my hand. Are you ready for this? It's not too late to take a different approach. I considered her question seriously. The path we were plotting wasn't just about financial security or even justice. It was about fundamentally altering the power dynamics of my life. It would require a ruthlessness I'd never had to summon before. Daniel once told me that true entrepreneurs don't just adapt to changing circumstances, I said slowly. They transform them into opportunities. I think it's time I showed him I was paying attention. Back at the cabin, preparations for the evening bonfire were underway. The annual tradition brought together family members for stories, s'mores, and singing as twilight descended over the lake. In past years, I'd always helped Eleanor coordinate, ensuring everything from firewood to marshmallow skewers was perfectly arranged. This year, I found her in the kitchen, directing the preparation of snack trays with military precision. "Rebecca, there you are," she said, not looking up from the artful arrangement of cheese and crackers. "Daniel's been looking for you." "I went for a walk," I replied, taking a knife to help slice fruit. "Needed some fresh air." Eleanor paused, studying me with the perceptive gaze that had intimidated generations of hospital staff. "You seem different today." I kept my eyes on the cutting board. "Do I?" Was all she offered, returning to her task. After a moment, she added, "Margaret would like to see you when you have a moment. She's resting in the blue bedroom." I hadn't expected that. "Is she feeling all right?" "She's fine," Eleanor said dismissively. "Just likes being dramatic at 92. Says she has something to discuss with you." Curious, I finished helping with the preparations, then made my way to the blue bedroom where Margaret Wilson held court whenever she stayed at the cabin. I knocked gently on the half-open door. "Come in, Rebecca," called a surprisingly strong voice for someone who had appeared at death's door a few hours earlier. Margaret sat regally in an armchair by the window, a handmade quilt across her lap despite the warm spring day. Her white hair was perfectly arranged, her posture as straight as her age allowed. She looked absolutely fine. "Eleanor said you wanted to see me," I said, taking the chair she gestured toward. "Close the door first," Margaret instructed. When I had done so, she fixed me with clear blue eyes that missed nothing. "So, my grandson is planning to divorce you." The directness of her statement caught me off guard. "How did you—" "Please," she scoffed. "I've lived through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and 4 husbands. You think I can't recognize when someone's planning to jump ship? Daniel's been distancing himself for months, and that young woman follows him around like she's already measuring the drapes." Despite everything, I found myself smiling at Margaret's bluntness. "You're right. He's planning to announce it today, during the reunion." "Coward's way," Margaret pronounced. "Robert would never have done such a thing. He had his faults, God knows, but he faced problems head-on." Her husband, the original Robert Wilson, had built the family construction business from nothing after returning from World War II. "I know about the announcement," Margaret continued. "Why do you think I choked on my water? Needed to buy you some time." I stared at her in amazement. "You did that on purpose?" Her smile was positively mischievous. "Of course I did. Saw you talking with Olivia, noticed the tension. Figure you needed a distraction while you sorted out your counterattack." She adjusted her quilt with arthritic but determined fingers. "So, what's the plan?" For a moment, I considered deflecting, offering some vague reassurance, but something about Margaret's directness deserved honesty in return. "I'm going to take his company," I said simply. Margaret's eyes lit up with appreciation. "Good girl. How?" Briefly, I outlined the strategy we'd developed, explaining about the convertible notes, the offshore manipulations, and our plan to leverage it all into a controlling interest. Margaret listened intently, nodding at key points, her expression growing more satisfied with each detail. "Baldwin," she mused when I'd finished. "Charles Baldwin's group?" I nodded, surprised she knew the name. "Charlie and I go way back," Margaret said, a hint of something more than friendship in her tone. "His second wife was my bridge partner. For 20 years, he always had a soft spot for me." "You know Charles Baldwin? Personally?" Margaret's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say he owes me a favor or two. Give me your phone." Bewildered, I handed it over. With surprising dexterity for someone her age, Margaret navigated to the contacts and entered a number. "There," she said, returning the phone. "That's Charlie's private line. Tell him Margaret Wilson suggested you call. He'll listen." I stared at the contact information for Charles Baldwin, a man Ryan had spent days trying to establish back-channel communication with. I don't know what to say. Say thank you and go finish preparing your ambush, Margaret replied briskly. And Rebecca, when you take over Horizon, remember who helped you. I expect excellent birthday presents for whatever years I have left. I laughed despite myself, leaning forward to kiss her papery cheek. Deal. As I left Margaret's room, I texted Ryan the unexpected development. His reply was immediate. Are you serious? Call Baldwin now. But there was no time. As I reached the main floor, I found Daniel waiting, his expression a carefully composed mask of concern. There you are, he said, taking my elbow in a gesture that once would have seemed affectionate, but now felt controlling. We need to talk before the bonfire. Actually, I began, looking for a way to delay, but Daniel was already guiding me toward his father's study, a room rarely used except for private conversations. It won't take long, he assured me, closing the door behind us. Robert's study was a time capsule of Wilson Construction's history. Blueprints framed on walls, models of significant projects displayed on shelves, awards and photos documenting the family business that had preceded Horizon Technologies. Daniel had grown up in his father's shadow, determined to build something even more significant, more lasting. I wanted to speak with you privately, Daniel began, leaning against his father's desk in a pose I'd seen him use in countless presentations. Casual authority, designed to project confidence while putting others at ease. About what I was going to announce at lunch. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Oh? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of genuine discomfort. The timing today wasn't right. Too many distractions. Grandmother's choking spell, I supplied helpfully. Among other things, he agreed. But the substance of what I need to discuss with you remains important. He was building to it, constructing the narrative just as I'd seen him do in the documents on his laptop. I could almost recite the talking points he'd prepared, how we'd grown apart, how our visions for the future no longer aligned, how he respected my contributions to the early days of Horizon, but needed different support moving forward. Daniel, I interrupted, surprising both of us. Before you continue, I need to make a call. He blinked, thrown off his carefully prepared script. A call? Now? It will only take a minute, I assured him, pulling out my phone. But it's important. Before he could object, I dialed the number Margaret had given me, putting the call on speaker. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin, I said clearly. This is Rebecca Wilson. Margaret Wilson suggested I call you directly. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Maggie Wilson. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while. How is the old firebrand? Quite well, I replied, watching Daniel's face shift from confusion to concern, still managing to be at the center of everything important. That sounds like Maggie, Baldwin agreed. What can I do for you, Mrs. Wilson? I understand your group holds convertible notes in Horizon Technologies that are coming due at the end of this quarter. Daniel's expression transformed from concern to alarm. He straightened from his casual pose, mouthing, "What are you doing?" at me with barely contained panic. We do indeed, Baldwin confirmed, his tone shifting to business. A substantial position. I'd like to discuss acquiring those notes before conversion, I said clearly. My financial team will follow up with details, but I wanted to establish direct contact first, on Margaret's recommendation. There was another pause, longer this time. I could almost see the calculating mind on the other end of the line, reassessing the board. The silence that followed my phone call to Charles Baldwin was deafening. Daniel stood frozen, his carefully constructed mask of confidence shattered. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, I saw raw, unfiltered panic in his eyes. It was both vindicating and strangely sad to witness the moment when he realized I was no longer playing by his rules. "Rebecca," he finally managed, his voice tight with controlled fury. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I ended the call with a promise to have Ryan contact Baldwin's team with the formal proposal. Then I turned to face my husband, feeling oddly calm in the eye of the storm I'd just created. "I'm protecting my interests," I replied simply. "Isn't that what you've been doing?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're meddling with. The Baldwin convertibles are part of a complex financial arrangement critical to Horizon's expansion strategy. This isn't some game of offshore accounts," I interrupted. "Shell companies? Artificial devaluation of assets prior to divorce proceedings? That kind of complex financial arrangement?" The color drained from his face. "You've been going through my files." It wasn't a question. "Just returning the favor," I said. "You've been planning my financial destruction for months. Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" Daniel moved away from the desk, pacing the small confines of his father's study like a caged predator. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes. Damage assessment, contingency planning, scenario mapping. It was the same expression he wore when navigating corporate crises. "Whatever you think you know," he began, his voice regaining some of its practiced smoothness. "You're operating with incomplete information. The company restructuring is about global tax efficiency, not hiding assets from your wife before divorcing her," I supplied. "Not conspiring with your girlfriend to blindside me at a family reunion. Not planning to use the prenup you had me sign when we had nothing to ensure I walk away with almost nothing now that we have everything." Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Daniel stopped pacing, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," I replied. "I heard you and Jessica in the boathouse this morning. But I've suspected for months. The late nights, the changed passwords, the sudden interest in separate accounts. I just didn't want to believe it." An emotion that might have been guilt flickered across his face, quickly replaced by strategic calculation. "Rebecca, listen. This doesn't have to be adversarial. I was planning to offer you a generous settlement, the house, ongoing support, while systematically erasing me from Horizon's story?" I shook my head. "I was there from day one, Daniel. I believed in you when no one else did. I designed the office spaces you couldn't afford to hire professionals for. I hosted the investor dinners and charmed the venture capitalists. I put my career on hold to help build your dream. And your grand plan was to reduce me to a footnote?" For a moment, the mask slipped completely, revealing a glimpse of the Daniel I'd fallen in love with. Vulnerable, uncertain. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We just grew apart. You stopped understanding what Horizon needed to become. "No," I corrected him. "You stopped seeing me as an equal partner. When did that happen, Daniel? When did I become an obstacle instead of an asset?" He had no answer for that. Outside, we could hear the sounds of family members gathering for the evening bonfire, laughter and conversation drifting through the windows. The contrast between the warm family celebration and the Cold War unfolding in Robert's study was jarring. "What do you want?" Daniel finally asked, his tone resigned. It was the question I'd been waiting for, the opening I needed. A seat at the table, literally and figuratively. His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I want what I've earned. Recognition for my role in building Horizon, and the appropriate compensation that comes with it." I stepped closer, meeting his gaze directly. "The Baldwin convertibles, combined with the shares you already transferred to me, would give me controlling interest in Horizon. That's my price." Daniel's laugh was hollow. "You want to take my company? That's insane. You don't know the first thing about running a tech enterprise." "I know how to hire the right people," I countered. I know how to build teams that operate with integrity as well as innovation. And I know that Horizon's strength has always been in its people, not just its patents. The board would never accept it, Daniel argued, grasping for leverage. The investors, the clients, they're loyal to me. Are they? I raised an eyebrow. Or are they loyal to their returns? Because once they learn about the financial manipulations you've been orchestrating, the offshore accounts, the hidden assets, the potential SEC violations, I wonder how loyal they'll remain. His expression hardened. You'd destroy everything. We built? Out of what, revenge? Not revenge, I corrected him. Justice and protection. You were planning to leave me vulnerable, Daniel. You don't get to be surprised when I refuse to cooperate with my own destruction. Before he could respond, a knock came at the study door. Daniel? Rebecca? Eleanor's voice. Everyone's waiting for you at the bonfire. We'll be right there. Mom! Daniel called, his voice impressively normal considering the circumstances. When Eleanor's footsteps receded, he turned back to me. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. But for now, we have a family event to attend. Unless you'd prefer to make your divorce announcement in this new context? The challenge hung between us. Daniel's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on grim determination. We'll continue this discussion later. Of course, I replied pleasantly. After all, we have the entire weekend. The bonfire was already blazing when we emerged from the house. Family members arranged in Adirondack chairs around the stone fire pit at the edge of the property. Daniel's sister Megan gave me a curious look as we took our seats, not side by side as in previous years, but at opposite points of the circle. Jessica was there too, seated between Amy and another cousin, looking tense and uncertain as she observed Daniel's rigid posture. Robert Wilson stood to begin the traditional storytelling that marked these gatherings, tales of family history and Wilson achievements passed down through generations. I barely heard the words, my mind racing with next steps, contingency plans, the video call with Baldwin's team scheduled for later that night. A movement caught my eye. Linda Martinez slipping out of the shadows to hand Daniel his phone. His expression darkened as he read whatever message she'd delivered, his eyes darting to Jessica, who looked equally concerned from across the fire. Something had happened, something beyond our confrontation in the study. Olivia, seated beside me, leaned close. Ryan says Baldwin's people are eager to talk. They've already started due diligence on our proposal. I nodded slightly, not wanting to draw attention. Daniel knows something's happening. Look at him. Olivia followed my gaze to where Daniel was now typing furiously on his phone, his face illuminated by the screen in the gathering darkness. Good. Let him squirm. The evening progressed with forced normalcy. S'mores were distributed, family songs were sung, childhood stories were recounted to the delight of younger generations. Through it all, Daniel remained distracted and tense, while Jessica seemed to be fighting mounting panic. Whatever message Linda had delivered had clearly disrupted their plans. As the fire died down and family members began drifting back to the cabin, Ryan texted that he'd set up the video call in the lake house. I made my excuses to Eleanor, claiming a headache, and slipped away from the gathering. Daniel watched me go, his expression unreadable in the firelight. The path to the lake house was dark, lit only by the occasional solar lamp along the shore. I was halfway there when I heard footsteps behind me. Rebecca, wait. I turned to find Linda Martinez following me, her professional demeanor intact, despite the casual setting and late hour. Linda, I acknowledged, wary of Daniel's loyal lieutenant. Shouldn't you be helping Daniel with whatever crisis has him so concerned? Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. You should know that the Baldwin Group has suspended all communication with Horizon's official channels pending your call tonight. I stared at her, reassessing everything I thought I knew about Linda's allegiances. How do you know about my call? Because I'm the one who alerted Baldwin's chief counsel to look more closely at the offshore transactions Mr. Wilson has been orchestrating, she replied calmly, 3 months ago. The revelation left me speechless. Linda had been laying groundwork long before I discovered Daniel's betrayal. Why? I finally managed. Linda's professional mask slipped, revealing a flash of genuine emotion. I've been with Horizon since you and Daniel were working out of your apartment. I've watched it grow from an idea to an empire. And I've watched what's been happening in the past year. The ethical compromises, the governance shortcuts. The company deserves better. And you think I can provide that? I think you understand what made Horizon special in the first place, Linda replied. The culture of innovation balanced with integrity that attracted so much talent. That's been eroding under the current leadership. Current leadership, not Daniel. The careful distinction told me volumes about where Linda stood. Does Daniel know you've been working against him? Not yet, Linda said. But he's beginning to suspect someone internal leaked information. Baldwin's sudden reluctance to communicate came as a shock. I studied her carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because you'll need allies inside the company, not just external leverage. When you speak with Baldwin tonight, you should know there's a contingent of senior staff who would support new leadership. The implications were staggering. Not only had Linda been covertly monitoring Daniel's activities, but she'd apparently been building a coalition within Horizon itself, preparing for exactly the kind of power shift I was now attempting to engineer. Thank you, Linda, I said sincerely. I won't forget this. She nodded once, professional mask back in place. I should return before my absence is noticed. Good luck with your call. As Linda disappeared back toward the main cabin, I continued to the lake house with a renewed sense of possibility. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about reclaiming and redirecting something valuable that had lost its way. Inside the lake house, Ryan had transformed the dining area into a makeshift war room. 3 laptops were arranged on the table, alongside stacks of documents and legal pads covered in notes. Mark Thompson was on a call in the corner, while Diane analyzed financial reports with laser-like focus. Olivia arrived moments after me, having made her own excuses to leave the bonfire. Baldwin's team will be on in 10 minutes, Ryan informed me, adjusting a webcam. They've assembled quite a group on their end. Chief counsel, financial officers, even Charles Baldwin himself. They're taking this seriously, Mark observed, ending his call and joining us, which means they see legitimate opportunity. It's more than that, I said, relaying my conversation with Linda. There's internal dissatisfaction with Daniel's leadership. Linda's been quietly organizing support for a change. Ryan whistled low. The executive assistant, always the power behind the throne. This changes our approach, Mark said thoughtfully. If there's already internal momentum for new leadership, Baldwin might see this as more than just a financial play. They could view it as stabilizing an important investment. At precisely 9 o'clock, the video call connected. On the screen appeared Charles Baldwin himself, a man in his 70s with shrewd eyes and the confident posture of someone accustomed to making billion-dollar decisions. Flanking him were several executives and legal counsel, all watching with careful attention. Mrs. Wilson, Baldwin greeted me. A pleasure to put a face to the name. Margaret speaks highly of you. Thank you for making time for this call, Mr. Baldwin, I replied. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss our mutual interests. Baldwin's expression was evaluative but not unkind. I've been briefed on your proposal to acquire our convertible position in Horizon Technologies, an unusual move given your personal connection to the company's CEO. A connection that is evolving, I acknowledged diplomatically. But my interest in Horizon has always been professional, as well as personal. I was there from the beginning. So I understand. Baldwin nodded. Margaret filled me in on quite a bit of history during our chat earlier. Quite illuminating. I made a mental note to thank Margaret Wilson yet again for her unexpected intervention. Whatever she'd told Baldwin had clearly piqued his interest enough to assemble his team on a holiday weekend. For the next hour, we engaged in a carefully choreographed dance of disclosure and negotiation. Ryan presented our financial analysis, highlighting the discrepancies we'd uncovered in Horizon's recent activities. Mark outlined the legal implications, both for the divorce proceedings and for corporate governance. I shared my vision for Horizon's future, a return to the core values that had made it successful, with new leadership focused on sustainable growth rather than financial engineering. Baldwin's team asked pointed questions, probing for weaknesses in our understanding or strategy. But the groundwork Linda had laid, combined with the evidence we'd gathered, created a compelling case. "Let me be direct, Mrs. Wilson," Baldwin said finally. "What you're proposing isn't simply a financial transaction. You're orchestrating a change in control of a major technology company. Why should we believe you're equipped to lead such an enterprise?" It was the question I'd been waiting for, the same one Daniel had thrown at me in Robert's study. "I don't intend to run Horizon's day-to-day operations, Mr. Baldwin," I replied honestly. "What I bring is governance and vision. The company already has brilliant engineers, creative designers, and effective managers. What it lacks is ethical leadership focused on long-term value rather than short-term maneuvering." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "You asked why you should believe in me. Look at Horizon's early history, the culture that attracted so much talent, the reputation for innovation with integrity. That was built as much by me as by Daniel. I was the one who insisted on fair equity for early employees, who pushed for family-friendly policies before they were common in tech, who helped create the workspace design that's now been copied across the industry." Baldwin studied me thoughtfully. "And you believe you can restore that culture?" "With the right team, yes." I glanced at Ryan, who nodded encouragement. "I've already begun discussions with key personnel inside Horizon who share this vision." That caught Baldwin's attention. "Internal support? At what level?" "Senior enough to matter," I replied, careful not to expose Linda or others who might have aligned with her. "People who remember what made Horizon special and want to see it return to those roots." Baldwin leaned back in his chair, exchanging glances with his team. After a brief murmured conversation off camera, he returned his attention to us. "Here's what I propose," he said. "We're willing to enter into an agreement giving you the right to acquire our convertible position, subject to certain conditions. We'll want board representation to protect our interests during the transition, and performance benchmarks tied to the leadership changes you're suggesting." Ryan shot me a subtle thumbs up. This was better than we'd hoped for. Not just acquisition of the convertibles, but Baldwin's implicit support for the leadership change we were planning. "That seems reasonable," I replied, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. "We'd want to move quickly, given the timing considerations." "Of course," Baldwin agreed. "My team will draft the necessary documents tonight. We can sign as early as tomorrow if your council approves." Mark Thompson leaned forward. "We'll want to coordinate the timing carefully with certain other elements of Mrs. Wilson's strategy." Baldwin's smile suggested he understood exactly what Mark meant. "I imagine you would. Rest assured, we can be discreet until you're ready to execute your full plan." As the call concluded with promises of document exchanges by morning, I felt a strange mixture of elation and apprehension. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Baldwin's support, Linda's internal coalition, the evidence of Daniel's financial manipulations. What had seemed impossible hours ago now appeared not just possible, but likely. "I can't believe that just happened," Olivia breathed when the screen went dark. "Charles Baldwin is backing your play." "Conditionally," Mark cautioned. "But yes, this is a significant development. If we can secure the Baldwin position and coordinate with the internal support Linda mentioned, we have a real chance of taking control of Horizon. Ryan was already typing rapidly on his laptop. I'm updating the financial models based on Baldwin's proposed terms. We'll need to liquefy some of your assets quickly, Rebecca. Do whatever's necessary, I authorized. My grandmother's trust. My design business holdings. Use them all. As the team continued strategizing, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Where are you?" Daniel is asking. The real world intruded on our war council. I needed to return to the main cabin before Daniel became suspicious enough to come looking for me. "I have to go back," I told the others. "Eleanor's asking questions." "Be careful," Olivia warned. "Daniel knows something's happening. He'll be watching you carefully." "I'll keep him distracted," I promised. "Just have everything ready for tomorrow." The walk back to the main cabin gave me time to compose myself, to shift from corporate strategist back to family member. The night had grown cooler, the stars brilliantly clear above the lake. In the distance, the cabin glowed with warmth, windows, illuminated against the darkness. A picture of family comfort that now felt like a facade covering deeper truths. Inside, most of the family had dispersed to their rooms or were gathered in small groups playing cards or chatting quietly. Eleanor was in the kitchen, preparing a tray of tea. "There you are," she said when she spotted me. "Feeling better?" "You left the bonfire so suddenly." "Much better," I replied, the half-truth coming easily. "Just needed some quiet time by the lake." Eleanor studied me with the perceptive gaze that had intimidated generations of hospital staff. "Daniel's in his father's study again. Said he needed to make some business calls." Her tone suggested what she thought of business calls during family weekend. "On a Saturday night?" I kept my voice light. The Stevens acquisition must be more complicated than he let on. Was Eleanor's only response as she arranged cookies on a plate. After a moment, she added, "Margaret's still awake, if you'd like to thank her." The pointed comment confirmed my suspicion that Eleanor knew more than she was letting on. Thank her? "For whatever assistance she provided earlier," Eleanor clarified, her expression carefully neutral. "My mother-in-law has always had an extensive network of influential acquaintances." I suppressed a smile. "I'll be sure to stop by her room." "Do that," Eleanor agreed. "And Rebecca? Whatever's happening between you and my son, remember, that family loyalties are complex. Not everyone wears their allegiances openly." With that cryptic comment, she picked up her tea tray and departed, leaving me to wonder just how much the Wilson matriarch had pieced together about the power struggle unfolding under her roof. As I passed Robert's study on my way upstairs, I could hear Daniel's voice, tense, urgent, the words indistinct, but the tone unmistakable. Crisis management in full swing. I paused, listening to the man I'd married speaking to someone, Jessica, probably, about contingency plans, damage control, counter strategies. For a moment, sadness washed over me. Not for what I was about to do, but for what had already been lost. The partnership I'd believed in. The shared dream that had turned hollow. When had Daniel stopped seeing me as an ally and started viewing me as a liability? When had calculation replaced connection? I continued upstairs, knocking softly on Margaret's door. "Come in," called the now familiar imperious voice. Margaret was still in her armchair by the window, though she'd changed into a silk dressing gown that must have been elegant in its day. She looked alert and satisfied, like a chess master watching a carefully planned gambit unfold. "I understand. I should thank you," I said, taking the seat across from her. "Charles was receptive, I take it?" Her eyes gleamed with interest. "Very. We're signing papers tomorrow." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Good. Charlie always had excellent business instincts, even as a young man." Something in her tone suggested personal knowledge that went beyond business. He mentioned your conversation was illuminating, I prompted. Margaret's smile was sly. I simply provided historical context. Charlie appreciates the value of institutional memory, something my grandson has been too quick to discard. You've noticed his changing priorities? Rebecca, Margaret said dryly. I may be old, but I'm not blind. Daniel has been methodically dismantling the culture that made Horizon special, too focused on quarterly numbers, not enough on the people who generate them. Like his father in the early days, before Eleanor knocked some sense into him. I leaned forward, curious despite the pressing matters at hand. What do you mean? Robert was much the same at Daniel's age. Brilliant but ruthless, always chasing the next big contract at any cost. Nearly destroyed Wilson Construction with his aggressive expansion. Eleanor finally gave him an ultimatum: change his approach or lose his family. He chose family, and the company was stronger for it. The parallel to Daniel's situation was striking, though with one critical difference: Daniel had already chosen Jessica and ambition over family and balance. I'm not sure Daniel would make the same choice, I said quietly. No, Margaret agreed, her expression softening slightly. That's the tragedy here. He never understood that what made Horizon truly valuable wasn't just the technology or the profits, but the people and principles behind them. She fixed me with a penetrating gaze. But you did. That's why you need to take it back. If everything goes as planned, I will. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering me since our earlier conversation. Why are you helping me, Margaret? Daniel is your grandson. And Horizon is my legacy too, she replied firmly. My husband's construction company provided the seed money that launched it. The Wilson name stands for something in this community: integrity, quality, commitment to people. I won't see that legacy squandered by a grandson who's forgotten what matters. There was steel beneath, the frail exterior, the same determination that had built businesses, raised families, endured losses. I saw in that moment where Daniel had inherited his drive, if not his recent ethical flexibility. I won't let you down, I promised. I know you won't, she said with surprising gentleness. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow will be demanding. As I left Margaret's room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my financial security or even justice for Daniel's betrayal. It was about reclaiming something valuable that had lost its way: a company, a legacy, a set of principles worth fighting for. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Jessica emerging from the guest room she'd been assigned. She looked startled. To see me, her usual poise momentarily disrupted. Rebecca, she acknowledged stiffly. I thought you'd retired for the evening. Just checking on Margaret, I replied, studying the woman who had conspired with my husband to erase me from his life and company. In the soft hallway light, she looked younger than her 34 years, and suddenly uncertain. How is she? Jessica asked, the polite question automatic. Surprisingly sharp, I answered truthfully. The Wilson women tend to be resilient. Something in my tone made Jessica look at me more carefully, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. Yes. Well, good night then. As she hurried toward the stairs, I wondered if Daniel had shared our confrontation with her, if she knew her carefully constructed future was rapidly unraveling. Either way, she would find out soon enough. In the bedroom, I shared with Daniel, perhaps. For the last time, I prepared for bed with mechanical movements, my mind still processing the day's extraordinary developments. From discovery to confrontation to coalition building, each hour had transformed my understanding of what was possible. I was nearly asleep when Daniel finally entered the room, moving quietly as if trying not to wake me. I kept my breathing, steady, feigning sleep while listening to him prepare for bed with the efficient routine of someone whose mind was elsewhere. When he finally slipped under the covers, maintaining careful distance between us, I could feel the tension radiating. From him, Whatever calls he'd been making had not resolved his concerns. If anything, they seemed to have increased them. "I know you're awake," he said after a long silence. I opened my eyes, turning to face him in the darkened room. "Yes." Daniel stared. At the ceiling, his profile sharply defined in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. "The Baldwin Group has suspended all communication with Horizon. Their chief counsel informed us they're considering strategic alternatives for their position in the company." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." He turned then, facing me across the expanse of our king-sized bed. "What have you done, Rebecca?" "What you taught me to do," I replied honestly. "Identified leverage and applied it strategically." Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, his expression a mixture of frustration and something that might have been reluctant admiration. "You're really going through with this? Trying to take control of Horizon?" "Not trying," I corrected him. "Doing. The paperwork will be signed tomorrow." He was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. "The board won't accept it. The executive team is loyal to me." "Some of them," I acknowledged. "Others remember what Horizon was before you started cutting ethical corners." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Linda," he said, realization dawning. "She's been feeding you information." "Linda believes in Horizon's potential," I replied, neither confirming nor denying his accusation. "So do many others who've watched you prioritize financial engineering over sustainable innovation." He sat up fully now, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of genuine distress. "You don't understand what we're building, Rebecca. The Stevens acquisition, the Asian expansion, these are transformational opportunities that require flexibility." "Flexibility?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling offshore accounts and hidden assets now?" Daniel's expression hardened. "Those structures were designed to optimize tax efficiency in a global market. Every tech company—" "Save it for the SEC," I interrupted. "Or for Jessica. I'm sure she finds your rationalizations compelling." At the mention of Jessica, Daniel fell silent, his internal calculations almost visible behind his eyes. Finally, he spoke again, his voice lower. "What do you really want, Rebecca? What's your endgame here?" "I told you in Robert's study. A seat at the table, recognition of my role in building Horizon, and the assurance that what we created together won't be corrupted by short-term thinking and ethical compromises." "And you think you can achieve that by hostile takeover?" Daniel's tone was incredulous. "There are other ways to negotiate. We could still reach an amicable—" "Like you were planning with your divorce announcement today?" I cut in. "That kind of amicable?" He had the grace to look away. "That was a miscalculation." "No," I corrected him. "It was revealing. Just like your hidden financial maneuvers and your affair with Jessica. They showed me exactly who you've become. Someone who sees people as either assets or obstacles, including your wife." Daniel was silent again, perhaps recognizing the truth in my assessment. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed, less defensive, more reflective. "When did we start seeing each other as adversaries instead of partners?" The question caught me off guard with its unexpected vulnerability. For a moment, I glimpsed the Daniel I'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, self-aware, capable of genuine connection. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe when Horizon became more important than the values it was built on. Maybe when success started to feel like an entitlement rather than a responsibility." He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "And there's no going back? No way to resolve this without corporate warfare?" "You were planning to announce our divorce at a family reunion," I reminded him. "You've been systematically hiding assets and conspiring with your girlfriend to minimize what I would receive? You were going to use the prenup I signed when we had nothing to ensure I walked away with almost nothing now that we have everything." Each point landed like a physical blow. Daniel didn't try to deny any of it. So no, I continued. I don't think there's a way back from that kind of calculated betrayal. But there is a way forward, one where Horizon returns to its founding principles and where my contribution is properly acknowledged. Daniel's expression shifted through several emotions: anger, resignation, and finally something like grudging respect. You've outmaneuvered me, he acknowledged. Baldwin, Linda, the internal coalition. I underestimated you. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. We lapsed into silence, the weight of 15 years and all that had happened between us filling the space. Outside, the lake lapped gently against the shore, a soothing counterpoint to the tension in the room. What happens tomorrow? Daniel finally asked. I signed the agreement with Baldwin. Their convertibles, combined with my existing shares, give me controlling interest in Horizon. The board will be notified immediately after. And me? There was genuine uncertainty in his voice. That depends on you, I replied. There's still a place for your technical vision at Horizon, Daniel. Just not as CEO, and not with Jessica in senior leadership. He absorbed this silently, his face unreadable in the darkness. I need to think, he said finally, throwing back the covers and standing. Don't expect me to simply surrender control of my company without exploring every option. Our company, I corrected him, and I never expected surrender, just recognition of the new reality. As Daniel gathered his things and left the room, presumably to spend the night strategizing countermoves, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and liberation. The marriage that had defined 15 years of my life was effectively over, yet I felt more authentically myself than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal maneuvers, board politics, family reactions. But for the first time since discovering Daniel's betrayal, I faced the future not with fear, but with clarity. Whatever happened next, I would be driving the narrative, not simply reacting to Daniel's scripts. As I drifted toward sleep, I remembered something my grandmother had told me when I was starting my design business. Success isn't about having power over others. It's about having the power to create the world you want to live in. Tomorrow, I would begin creating that world. A company built on integrity as well as innovation. Relationships based on respect rather than utility. Daniel had taught me many things during our years together, but perhaps the most valuable lesson was the one he never intended. That I was capable of writing my own story, not just supporting his. And that story was just beginning. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows as I stood at the counter, methodically preparing coffee. The familiar routine felt strangely comforting amid the chaos of the previous day's revelations and confrontations. Outside, mist rose from the lake's surface, creating an ethereal landscape that belied the very real drama unfolding within these walls. I hadn't seen Daniel since our midnight conversation. At some point, he must have retrieved his things from our room. His side of the bed remained untouched, his toiletries gone from the bathroom. The battle lines had been drawn, and neither of us was pretending anymore. Eleanor entered the kitchen, her sharp eyes taking in my solitary coffee preparation. You're up early, she observed, retrieving her favorite mug from the cabinet. Couldn't sleep, I admitted, pouring a cup for her before filling my own. She accepted it with a nod of thanks. No sign of Daniel this morning, or his, colleague. The slight pause before colleague spoke volumes about Eleanor's assessment of Jessica's role. I imagine they're busy strategizing, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Today's an important day. Eleanor studied me over the rim of her mug. Yes, I imagine it is. She hesitated, then added, Robert and I had a long talk last night. About Horizon. About Daniel's recent decisions. About you. I tensed slightly, uncertain where this was heading. The Wilson family loyalties were complex, as Eleanor herself had reminded me. Would they ultimately side with their son, regardless of his actions? Eleanor, She held up a hand, stopping my explanation before it began. Rebecca, we've known something was wrong for months. The changes in Daniel, the questionable business moves, the young woman who suddenly became indispensable. She sighed. The sound weighted with disappointment. We raised him better than this. The simple statement carried such profound sadness that I felt a lump form in my throat. I'm sorry it's come to this, I said honestly. I never wanted... Of course you didn't, Eleanor interrupted again. But here we are, and now choices must be made. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Documents ready. Baldwin's team meeting us at 10 a.m. All systems go. Eleanor must have seen something change in my expression. Your reinforcements are in place? She asked, surprising me with her perceptiveness. Yes, I replied, deciding honesty was the best approach. We're meeting at 10. She nodded decisively. Good. Family breakfast is at 8. I've asked everyone to be there, no exceptions. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. One last gathering before the fireworks begin. As Eleanor moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, beginning preparations for feeding the extended Wilson clan, I was struck by her calm acceptance of the situation. No recriminations, no attempts to preserve a failing marriage for appearance's sake. Just practical acknowledgement of reality and determination to manage what came next with dignity. Can I help? I offered, wanting something concrete to do, while waiting for the hours to pass. Set the dining table, Eleanor directed. The good china. If we're having a family schism, we might as well use the Wedgwood. Her dry humor startled a laugh from me. The Wilson matriarch's pragmatic approach to crisis was oddly reassuring. A reminder that families weather storms, that life continues even when relationships fracture. By 7:30, the smell of coffee and bacon had drawn family members from their rooms. Cousins and their children descended on the kitchen in sleepy waves, while Eleanor directed traffic with characteristic precision. I kept busy with final preparations, aware of curious glances and murmured conversations that stopped when I approached. Word had spread, perhaps through Linda or Jessica, or simply through the family grapevine, that something significant was happening between Daniel and me. At precisely 8 o'clock, Eleanor rang the small brass bell that had signaled Wilson family meals for generations. Breakfast is served, she announced. Everyone to the dining room, please. The assembled family members migrated to the formal dining room, where the Wedgwood china gleamed against crisp linen tablecloths. I took my usual seat near one end of the table, while Eleanor presided at the head. Robert Wilson, tall and imposing even in his 70s, stood behind his wife's chair, surveying the gathering with watchful eyes. Daniel arrived last, with Jessica a careful distance behind him. His expression was controlled, professional. The same face he presented to investors during challenging quarters. She looked less composed, her designer casual wear impeccable, but her eyes revealing tension. They took seats at the opposite end of the table, as far from me as possible. Eleanor waited until everyone was settled, then spoke with the directness that had characterized her career as a hospital administrator. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're gathering at a difficult moment for this family. There are changes coming that will affect all of us. Her gaze swept the table, lingering briefly on Daniel, then me. But we are still family, and we will face these changes together with respect and dignity. The pointed emphasis on respect and dignity was not lost on anyone, least of all Daniel, whose jaw tightened visibly. Now, Eleanor continued, Robert would like to say something before we eat. Robert Wilson cleared his throat, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. The Wilson name has stood for something in this community for 3 generations: integrity, quality, family. Whatever happens in the coming days, I expect those values to be honored. It was both blessing and warning, directed not just at Daniel and me, but at everyone present. A reminder that family conflicts should not become public spectacles, that certain standards were expected regardless of personal disagreements. As platters of food began circulating, conversation resumed, stilted at first, then flowing more naturally as family members found safer topics. The weather, the children's activities, summer plans. Through it all, Daniel maintained his composure, engaging politely with relatives while studiously avoiding direct interaction with me. I caught Olivia's eye across the table. She gave me a subtle nod. Everything was proceeding as planned. Ryan would be at the lake house, preparing for the Baldwin meeting. Mark Thompson would be reviewing the final documents. The machinery we had set in motion was grinding forward, inexorable now. As breakfast concluded, Eleanor stood again. I know many of you had planned to stay through Monday, but given the circumstances, Robert and I understand if you need to adjust your plans. Whatever you decide, you're welcome here. It was a gracious acknowledgement of the awkwardness many must be feeling, caught in the middle of what was clearly a significant family rupture. Several cousins exchanged glances, uncertainty evident in their expressions. Megan, Daniel's sister, broke the silence. Mom, Dad? I think I speak for all of us when I say we appreciate your directness. Obviously, something major is happening. She glanced between Daniel and me. But the Wilson family has weathered challenges before. Whatever comes next, we'll deal with it together. Murmurs of agreement followed her statement, along with relieved nods. The family wouldn't be taking sides, at least not publicly. They would wait and watch, preserving the unity Eleanor and Robert clearly valued. As family members dispersed from the dining room, I felt Daniel's eyes on me for the first time that morning. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of resignation and calculation. He knew what was coming, but wasn't ready to concede. Not yet. I checked my watch. 9:15. 45 minutes until the Baldwin meeting that would irrevocably alter the power dynamics, not just of our marriage, but of the company we had built together. Rebecca. Daniel's voice stopped me as I was leaving the dining room. He stood at the other end of the now empty table, Jessica conspicuously absent. Can we talk? Privately? I hesitated, wary of last-minute manipulation attempts. I have a meeting soon. I know, he acknowledged. With Baldwin, this won't take long. Curious despite my reservations, I nodded. Robert's study? 5 minutes? The small room where we had confronted each other the previous day felt different. In morning light, less a battleground, more a neutral zone. Daniel closed the door behind us, his movements betraying a tension his voice had concealed. I've been up all night, he began without preamble, talking to the board members I could reach, to legal counsel, to strategic advisors, looking for a way to block what you're planning. I waited, sensing there was more. And? I finally prompted when he didn't continue. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of genuine discomfort from a man who prided himself on composure. And I couldn't find one, not without risking everything. The company, my reputation, possibly even criminal charges if the SEC decides to look closely at some of the offshore arrangements. The admission clearly cost him. Daniel Wilson, master strategist, acknowledging checkmate. So where does that leave us? I asked. With a choice. He met my eyes directly. Mutual destruction or negotiated resolution. I raised an eyebrow. Negotiated how? Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the lake for a moment before turning back to me. I'll step down as CEO, support your ascension to chairwoman of the board, help transition leadership smoothly, including unwinding the more questionable financial structures. And in return? I prompted, knowing there would be conditions. I retain a meaningful role at Horizon, Chief Innovation Officer or similar. No day-to-day management, but involvement in product vision and strategy. Jessica transfers to the Singapore office. No leadership role. It wasn't an unreasonable proposal, acknowledging the new reality while preserving Daniel's connection to the company he had founded. But there was something missing. And us? Our marriage? Daniel's expression softened slightly. I think we both know that's over, Rebecca. Too much has happened. The simple acknowledgement brought a surprising pang of sadness, despite everything. 15 years of shared history, ending not with drama, but with quiet recognition of irreconcilable damage. Amicable divorce, Daniel continued. Fair division of personal assets, separate from the Horizon situation. No public acrimony. I studied him carefully, looking for the manipulation beneath the reasonable facade. But all I saw was exhaustion and pragmatism. A man cutting his losses, salvaging what he could from a situation largely of his own making. Why the change of heart? I asked. Yesterday, you were planning to announce our divorce at a family gathering, to leave me with virtually nothing. Daniel winced slightly. A miscalculation, he admitted. One of several I've made recently. That's not an explanation, I pressed. He was silent for a moment, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. Linda resigned this morning, he finally said. Sent a company-wide email detailing her concerns about leadership direction and ethical compromises. Copied the board and major investors. So that was it. Not a change of heart, but recognition that his support was crumbling from within as well as without. Linda's move had been the final blow, confirming what our Baldwin deal would make official. Daniel's absolute control of Horizon was over. I see, I said simply. Daniel's jaw tightened at my tone. This isn't surrender, Rebecca. It's adaptation to changed circumstances. Something any good CEO knows how to do. And the offshore accounts? The hidden assets? The systematic attempt to minimize what I would receive in the divorce? Were those also adaptations? He had the grace to look away. Mistakes. Serious ones. Yes, I agreed. They were. We stood in silence for a moment. 15 years of partnership and conflict compressed into this quiet standoff in Robert's study. Finally, I checked my watch. 9:40. Time to leave for the Baldwin meeting. I need to go, I said. We can continue this discussion after I've met with Baldwin. Daniel nodded, resignation clear in his posture. Their representatives are already at the lake house. Ryan's been briefing them since 8. Of course he knew. Daniel still had sources, still commanded loyalty from segments of Horizon's organization. The information battle would continue even as the power balance shifted. Then you know what's at stake, I replied. I'll consider your proposal, but I won't make any commitments until the Baldwin deal is signed. As I turned to leave, Daniel's voice stopped me once more. Rebecca, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the recent decisions, but for forgetting what made us strong in the first place. I looked back at him, this man I had loved and built a life with, now simultaneously adversary and potential ally in a new configuration. So am I, Daniel. So am I. Outside, the morning had warmed, burning off the mist to reveal a perfect spring day. I walked the path to the lake house with a strange sense of calm, aware that I was heading toward a moment that would fundamentally alter my life's trajectory. Olivia waited on the porch, pacing nervously until she spotted me. Everything's ready, she reported as I approached. Baldwin's team arrived early, very eager to finalize things. Daniel knows, I told her. He's proposing a negotiated transition instead of a fight. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. You're kidding. Daniel Wilson? Surrendering without a battle? What changed? Linda resigned publicly with a detailed explanation of her concerns. The internal coalition is making itself known. Olivia whistled softly. Perfect timing. Ryan needs to know before the Baldwin meeting. Inside the lake house, the scene resembled a corporate war room more than a vacation property. Multiple laptops were open on the dining table. Documents spread across every surface. Ryan was deep in conversation with Charles Baldwin's legal team, while Mark Thompson reviewed papers with Diane. Ryan looked up as we entered, relief evident in his expression. There you are. We're ready to proceed. Just waiting for Baldwin himself to join via video. Daniel knows, I said, repeating what I'd told Olivia. He's offering to step down as CEO, transition leadership smoothly, in exchange for a continued role in product strategy. And Linda has resigned, with a public statement about her concerns. The news rippled through the room, strategic calculations visible on every face. This changes our approach, Mark said thoughtfully. If Daniel's willing to cooperate, we can avoid a protracted leadership battle that might damage Horizon's stability. But we don't ease up on the Baldwin acquisition, Ryan cautioned. That's our leverage to ensure Daniel follows through. Agreed, I confirmed. We proceed as planned, then negotiate from a position of strength. A chime from one of the laptops announced the video call from Charles Baldwin. Ryan quickly arranged the seating so I would be front and center, the rest of the team visible, but clearly in supporting roles. Baldwin's face appeared on screen, his expression suggesting he was well aware of the morning's developments. Mrs. Wilson, he greeted me. I understand congratulations may be in order. Your internal coalition seems to have made itself known earlier than expected. News travels fast, I observed. Baldwin's smile was knowing. In business as in life, timing is everything. I've received 3 calls from Horizon board members this morning, all suddenly very interested in my thoughts on the company's leadership succession. So it wasn't just Linda. The tremors were spreading throughout Horizon's governance structure, with board members already positioning themselves for the coming change. My legal team has reviewed the final documentation, Baldwin continued. All business now. Everything appears in order. Are you prepared to execute the agreement? I took a deep breath, aware that this was the point of no return. Once signed, the Baldwin convertible notes would be under my control, giving me, combined with my existing shares, effective control of Horizon Technologies. I confirmed. The next 30 minutes proceeded with the practiced efficiency of experienced dealmakers. Documents were signed electronically, confirmations exchanged, bank transfers initiated. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior that belied the emotional significance of what was happening. This wasn't just a corporate transaction. It was the reclamation of my voice in a narrative that Daniel had tried to control. As the final signatures were applied, Baldwin addressed me directly once more. Mrs. Wilson, or should I say, Chairwoman, I look forward to working with you to restore Horizon to its founding principles. Margaret spoke highly of your vision for the company's future. Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. I won't disappoint you, or Margaret. After the call ended, the team exchanged relieved glances, the tension of the past 24 hours finally breaking. It's done, Ryan confirmed, reviewing the final confirmations. You now control Horizon Technologies. Olivia squeezed my hand. How does it feel? I considered the question seriously. Not triumph, as I might have expected. Not even vindication, though there was some of that. What I felt most strongly was responsibility. For the company's future, for the employees who depended on it, for the legacy that Margaret Wilson had reminded me was bigger than any individual. It feels like the beginning, I replied honestly. Now the real work starts. Mark was already on his phone coordinating the next steps. I'll draft the formal notification to the board. Ryan's team will file the necessary SEC disclosures about the change in control. Diane is preparing the forensic analysis of the offshore structures so we can begin unwinding them properly. The machinery of corporate transition was already in motion, professionals doing what they did best. But I had one more task, perhaps the most difficult one. I need to talk to Daniel, I said. Finalize the terms of the leadership transition. Olivia looked concerned. Want me to come with you? I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. As I walked back to the main cabin, I rehearsed what needed to be said. This wasn't about revenge anymore, if it ever truly had been. It was about setting a new course, one that honored what Horizon had been meant to be from the beginning. I found Daniel on the upper deck, alone, staring out at the lake. The family had scattered to various activities, giving us space for the conversations that needed to happen. He turned as he heard my approach, his expression carefully neutral. "It's done," I said simply. He nodded once, accepting the information, without visible reaction. The board? Being notified now, SEC filings in process. Daniel absorbed this silently, turning back to the view. After a moment, he spoke again. "Your terms?" I moved to stand beside him at the railing, both of us looking out at the water rather than at each other. "Your proposal is acceptable, with additions. You step down as CEO, transition to Chief Innovation Officer. Jessica transfers to Singapore with no leadership role. And the additions? Full disclosure of all offshore arrangements and hidden assets, transparent unwinding of any questionable financial structures, public acknowledgement of my role in founding and building Horizon." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly at the last requirement, but he nodded. "Reasonable. Timeline? Immediate announcement of leadership transition. 30 days for you to complete the handover to interim CEO. Linda's replacement to be determined by the board with my approval. Quarterly board reviews of your role and performance as CIO." It was businesslike, pragmatic, the negotiation of professionals rather than spouses. Whatever personal relationship we had shared was separate from this corporate realignment, to be addressed in its own time. "Divorce terms?" Daniel asked, finally turning to face me. "Equitable division of personal assets. No alimony in either direction. Clean break." He studied me for a long moment, perhaps searching for the anger or triumph he expected to see. Instead, he found calm determination. A woman who had found her voice and would not relinquish it again. "You've changed," he observed. "No," I corrected him. "I've remembered who I was before I started defining myself through your expectations. There's a difference." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "I underestimated you, more than once it seems." "A common mistake," I acknowledged. "One I hope Horizon's future partners and competitors will also make." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "They will. Right before you show them exactly who they're dealing with." We lapsed into silence, the weight of 15 years and all that had happened between us settling into something like acceptance, if not peace. The anger wasn't gone, might never be completely gone, but it no longer drove my decisions. What mattered now was moving forward with integrity and purpose. "I should find Jessica," Daniel said eventually. "Explain the new arrangements." I nodded. "And I need to brief Eleanor and Robert. They deserve to hear directly from me about what's happening with the company their family helped build." As Daniel turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, Rebecca, I think you'll be better at this than I was. Horizon needs what you bring, the balance I lost sight of somewhere along the way." It was as close to a blessing as I was likely to get, and I accepted it with a nod. "Thank you. I hope you find your way back to what matters, Daniel, even if it's not with Horizon or with me." After he left, I remained on the deck for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what had happened in the span of 24 hours. From discovering Daniel's betrayal to retaking control of our shared creation, a journey that had transformed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of my own capabilities. Eleanor found me there, her perceptive gaze taking in my thoughtful expression. "It's done," she asked, joining me at the railing. Yes, I confirmed. Daniel will step down as CEO. I'll become chairwoman of the board. He'll stay on in a reduced role, focused on innovation rather than management. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. And the marriage? Over, I said simply. Too much has happened. She was quiet for a moment, her eyes on the distant mountains. You know, when Robert and I were first married, he nearly lost Wilson Construction with some reckless expansion decisions. His father had built it from nothing, and Robert almost destroyed it with ambition untethered from wisdom. I listened, curious where this was going. I gave him an ultimatum, Eleanor continued. Change how he operated. Put people before profits. Integrity before expansion, or lose his family. It was the hardest conversation of our marriage. What happened? I asked, though I knew they had ultimately stayed together. He chose family, Eleanor said simply. Rebuilt the company on sounder principles. Learned that success without integrity is just postponed failure. I understood then what she wasn't saying, that Daniel had faced a similar crossroads and made a different choice. The parallel wasn't exact, but the essential truth was the same. Character revealed under pressure. I'm sorry it's ending this way, I told her. I know it's not what you hoped for your son's marriage. Eleanor's hand covered mine briefly on the railing. What I hoped for was that he would be the man we raised him to be. One who honors commitments, who values people above possessions, who understands that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. Her words held disappointment but not judgment, at least not of me. It was a gift I hadn't expected, this quiet affirmation from the woman who had been more mother to me than my own in many ways. What will you do now? She asked. I gazed out at the lake, considering the question. Lead Horizon back to its founding principles. Build something that honors the Wilson legacy of integrity and quality. Create the future I always believed was possible. Eleanor nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. Good. Remember, you'll always have a place here, Rebecca. Family isn't just blood. As she left me to my thoughts, I felt a sense of possibility opening before me. The end of my marriage to Daniel didn't mean the end of all the connections I'd built over 15 years. Some relationships would endure, transformed, but not destroyed by what had happened. The rest of the day unfolded with a strange mixture of tension and relief. Word spread quickly through the family about the leadership changes at Horizon, though most details remained private. Daniel and Jessica left shortly after lunch, heading back to Seattle to begin damage control with key employees and partners. The family reunion continued for those who chose to stay, a testament to Eleanor and Robert's stabilizing influence. By evening, the first public announcements were hitting the business news sites. Leadership change at Horizon Technologies. Founder steps down. Co-founder takes chair role. The narrative we had crafted, acknowledging my foundational role while allowing Daniel a dignified transition, was being established in the public record. Margaret summoned me to her room after dinner, her eyes bright with satisfaction as she read the news coverage on her tablet. Well done, she said simply. The Wilson legacy continues, just not through the channel everyone expected. I smiled at the family matriarch who had played such an unexpected role in the weekend's events. Thank you for your help, Margaret. I couldn't have done this without you. Nonsense, she scoffed. You would have found another way. But I'm glad I could expedite matters. Charles Baldwin has always been a good judge of character. He recognized what you bring to the table immediately. And what's that? I asked, curious about her assessment. Margaret's eyes twinkled with the wisdom of her 92 years. The understanding that companies, like families, thrive when values and vision align, when people matter more than profits, when integrity guides innovation. It was the philosophy I intended to restore to Horizon's operations, the approach that had attracted so much talent in the early days, before quarterly pressures and expansion ambitions had eroded our founding principles. I won't let you down, I promised. I know, Margaret replied with surprising gentleness. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow's your first day as the most powerful woman in Seattle tech. You'll want to be sharp. As I prepared for bed in what had been our shared room, now mine alone, I found a note on the pillow. Daniel's handwriting, a few simple lines. Rebecca, you were right. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what made Horizon special. Perhaps you can restore it. Whatever happens next, I'm sorry for how things ended between us. D. Not quite an apology, not quite a blessing, but an acknowledgement at least. That something valuable had been damaged by his choices. It was more than I had expected, and somehow both satisfying and sad. I slept deeply that night, the tension of the past 24 hours finally releasing its hold. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, illuminating the start of a new chapter. My phone was already filling with messages, board members seeking private conversations, employees expressing support, media requesting interviews. The machinery of corporate transition was in full swing, requiring my immediate attention. As I packed to return to Seattle, Olivia appeared in the doorway. "Ready for this?" she asked, gesturing toward my buzzing phone. I considered the question seriously. Was I ready to step into a leadership role I'd never sought? To navigate the challenges of rebuilding a company culture while managing a public divorce?